I do mad cleaning. Do you do mad cleaning?
I don't
Like
know what that means.
when my wife and I are fighting, it's like when I get the
Oh,
most cleaning work done.
I mean, definitely it helps if there's a certain kind of energy in my body that I want to
Yeah,
dissipate.
yeah.
Not necessarily mad. I mean, probably it probably happens. Yeah, yeah.
And there's a little part in the back of my mind, and I'm saying this not because I want it to be used in a cold open because it makes me look like a piece of shit.
But
But there's a little bit that's like, I might be losing this argument, but I'm cleaning the house, which
yeah,
makes me the better one.
that's right. She's gonna see this and realize
that
that
I'm the best one.
that I'm just so good, and she's wrong for being mad at me. Yeah, no one except you has ever had that thought, Scott.
Well, no, I mean, okay. Everyone has that thought. The difference is not everyone admits it in front of a
Right,
microphone.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's do it. Hello and welcome to Flanagan's Wake, a Doof Media podcast watching, analyzing, and discussing the collective works of Henry James. I mean, Mike Flanagan. I mean, both.
Yes.
Both. My name is Scott Daly, and I am your host. And joining me, as always, he's got a really scary story to tell us, but he needs to send away for it to have the story shipped back to him. So he's got to send a key out, and then the person will unlock the drawer and get the story and then send it back. It's going to take 4 to 6 business days, but then Matt will tell us this really intense, scary story, right, Matt?
Yeah, and then you're gonna sit there for 6 hours and let me read it to you, right?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, as we do traditionally.
Of course. This week on the show, we are officially kicking off our coverage of Mike Flanagan's follow-up to The Haunting of Hill House. This one is titled The Haunting of Bly Manor. And like Hill House before it, Bly is a loose adaptation of a famous literary horror novel. So before we get into the show itself, we're going to be spending some time examining that work and some other works of the author Henry James. First, this week we'll be taking a look at The Turn of the Screw. This is a novella that I think Bly Manor is most largely based off of. So we're going to be reading some other short stories, but I mean, you can already see The Haunting of Bly Manor. Bly is the location of this book, as you saw when you read it. And then after we do The Haunting of Bly Manor, after we do The Turn of the Screw, we're going to spend 4 weeks reading about 8 different Henry James short stories. The titles of those short stories are the titles of the episodes of Mike Flanagan's Bly Manor. I have never read those short stories. Matt has never read those short stories. So do those short stories actually relate to the episodes of Bly Manor? Who knows? I mean, somebody knows, but not us. And so we're gonna go on an adventure and figure it out.
Yes, we will find out, and then you will know, and then we will all know together.
Yeah, together. And then, of course, we're going to wrap everything up with taking 9 weeks to look at Flanagan's 9-episode series, The Haunting of Bly Manor, 1 episode at a time. And Matt, if you can believe it, all of this will take us all the way through the end of 2025. I believe our final episode on The Haunting of Bly Manor will be Christmas Day, actually, or maybe the day after Christmas. Christmas Day is when that episode's supposed to come out, our overview episode on Bly Manor. So this is it for the rest of 2025. This is all we're doing. It's Henry James, it's Bly Manor, it's screws, and the turning of said screws. And that's what we're doing.
Cool.
All right, let's get into Henry James and the turn of the screw itself. Matt, what do you know of Henry James?
I mean, before this, I knew almost nothing. He was not a writer whose works I had ever read, and I don't even know that I recognized his name prior to us starting in on him. So, which is kind of interesting because he was this, renowned writer of the past, and he's clearly been influential. We can say that.
But certainly, yeah.
It's just I don't know that he is a household name anymore, or maybe he is just not in my household.
I don't think so. I mean, it is interesting that I think he was a pretty a prolific author. I can talk. He was a pretty prolific author. He wrote a lot, right? He wrote a lot of novels. He wrote novellas and short stories. He wrote plays. He wrote nonfiction. He wrote a lot, and he wrote often, and he was very busy with it. He was a 19th century American / British writer. So I think he was born in America, but then moved to Europe. Britain and then the rest of Europe when he was a kid. So he spent a lot of time over there, which gives him kind of a very different looks at the world. Coming from one being born very American to then getting to spend time in Europe and seeing how they do stuff over there. It just gives him, I think, a pretty interesting and unique look on things. And I think his most popular novel, I would say, is the Portrait of a Lady, which I've never read. I know you've never read, but we did watch a great movie where you set that Portrait of a Lady on fire, and that was a pretty great movie.
And I have a feeling that that's a different story, but
it is. It is indeed a different story. Yeah. I think The Turn of the Screw, the book we're talking about today, though, is probably his most adapted work. This one has been adapted many, 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 many times, including I think the most well-known adaptation of The Turn of the Screw is a 1961 horror movie called The Innocents, that is actually pretty closely related to the book. It's a pretty close adaptation, I think. And I think Flanagan obviously used, when we look up Bly Manor, I think we will be able to tell he took a lot from The Innocents, in the same way that I think he took a lot from Hill House, not only from Shirley Jackson's novel, but from The Haunting, the 1960s Hill House adaptation movie. So it might behoove us to, before we get into Bly Manor, to just watch The Innocents. We don't have to do a whole episode on it, but maybe just in our our spare time, we can watch that 1960s horror film.
It's probably a good idea. I feel like while we're talking about influences and adaptations and so forth, just to mention the fact that it really does seem like The Haunting of Hill House, the novel, is a pretty direct spiritual descendant of this story, this exact story that we're going to talk about today. And what I mean, we'll talk about it as we go, but what I mean by that is the word of the year, ambiguity, and the, you know, the lack of clarity around the basic question of, is the supernatural thing that appears to be happening in this story really happening, or do we just have a unreliable narrator? That is the common through line between these two projects, right? Like, I mean, there are plenty of through lines, right? There are ghost stories, they're in isolated manners, right? But there are plenty of ghost stories in isolated manners. It's a popular place to set ghost stories, really. What really makes them, like, as soon as you pick up this book, you're like, oh, I get it. Like, Henry James was doing this thing, and then Shirley Jackson did her twist on that thing later, and that's the connection.
Yeah. No, I think it's the perfect follow-up to the Hill House. You know, like, you look at, okay, The Haunting of Hill House was very popular. Netflix says, hey, Mike, more of that. And he's like, okay, well, I wrote a contained story. It's done. It's over. There's nothing more there. But maybe we can do like a fun anthology type thing where this is a new haunting, and we take a new classic book of horror literature, and like, what book to pick from. I wonder how long it took before it was just, oh, The Turn of the Screw, right? Because I think you're right. I think it is this kind of perfect comparison, and I think the differences between The Haunting of Hill House and The Turn of the Screw, I think, are really fascinating. And I think a lot of our conversation today is going to circle around the idea of, this was a book that was written in the late 19th century, and how people talked about, analyzed, and even thought about storytelling at that time period is radically different than it was even when Shirley Jackson wrote her book. And then, of course, even today, like, just like, stuff like that has changed over time. The way people think about stories, the way people talk about stories, the way people analyze stories has changed over time. And I think this book is a really interesting kind of slice of time that we could maybe use to demonstrate how we talk about stories has changed. Or maybe, I don't know, we haven't had this conversation yet, Matt, or maybe it shows how really the way we talk about stories hasn't changed as much as we thought. I don't know. We'll see.
I don't know if we can know. I mean, I did think this was interesting. So I think you and I are sort of responding to the same thing that we read about this book, which is that when it came out, it seems like the interpretation of the book was, oh, what a scary ghost story. The part with the ghosts, that was scary.
Yeah.
The idea that ghosts would be after the souls of the children. Wow, how compelling. And then like suddenly many decades later, somebody was like, hey, wait a minute. I think the governess is just crazy. And then everybody was like, yeah, that was obvious the whole time, actually. And then it totally changed. I'm exaggerating for comedic effect a little bit here, but like basically the actual textual interpretation of what the story is about like changed at some point, and it became the one that we're referencing now, where it's a lot more like The Haunting of Hill House, where it's like, I don't know. The book never actually clearly tells you which is the case.
Well, it lives in this place of ambiguity, actually, just like the Hill House. Like, because I think there is an interpretation that these ghosts are real, and everything that the governess is going through actually did happen, and it becomes a story about this woman, which is something Henry James often wrote about. He wrote about these female protagonists facing oppression by the systems that they lived under, and so in that interpretation, this is this woman who has been granted this very important role by this very rich and powerful person who doesn't give a shit about this niece and nephew of his, and the pressures of that are representative by these ghosts kind of hovering around the kids, trying to influence them and control them, and the pressure of that, and the pressure of the system that she's under, and the lack of power and control to do anything in that system. Like, that's a perfectly fine story, but I think it's fascinating when you read it from the lens of someone coming from the 21st century. Like, it just seemed so self-evident to me that part of what Henry James wants us to do is go, is she a little nuts though? Was she just a little crazy?
Yeah. Well, I think there's okay, so one thing I'll say, we didn't really talk about our experience reading this book, and I found it to be...
I guess before you go into that, let's just say, like, I just want to... listeners can probably tell already, we are not going to cover this book like we normally cover books on the show. We are not going to do... We thought long and hard about this, and it just didn't make any sense to do like our beat by beat, section by section, basically walkthrough of the plot. First of all, we're covering the whole story in one episode, so it's already a little bit different. And then second of all, this just didn't feel like the right book for that at all. So this conversation, I think, is going to be much more loose, much more free flowing. We're not going to hit plot beats. Of course, we're going to talk about the plot of the book, but I think we're just going to be kind of much more, I don't know, free flowing with it, I think.
Yeah. So what I was saying, that I think I simultaneously found it difficult to get through because of the language, but also there were moments of extreme, like, effective anxiety. I hesitate to use the word horror because I didn't feel scared. I felt anxious for, like, in a sometimes in a very sharp and specific way, sometimes in a broad and undefined way. And I think, okay, I kind of want to state my personal case on this, which is not... So I don't think that Henry James sat down to, like, intentionally write a story that was about this governess losing her mind and then write it as a sort of unreliable narrator story. I think really what he's playing with is the idea of, like, isn't this so much more intense and terrifying if there's absolutely no corroboration that what you're seeing is true, and that makes you even more isolated.
Yeah.
And also doubt yourself. I think there's even... I mean, there are distinct points in the story when she doubts, like, have I misunderstood what's going on here, you know? And I think there were parts when I kind of wanted to, like, grab the book and be like, yes, you have. You're losing your grip on reality, but you're not actually sure that that's true, right? Like, I think the most anxiety-inducing parts for me were these exchanges that she has with the boy, where she is reading all of this subtext and meaning into the way he's saying things, and You can read it and be like, that sinister little shit. But you can also read it and be like, he's just a kid kind of saying nonsense, he's just bantering. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything. He's just passing the time. He's walking along and running his mouth. There's nothing going on here. You're going into a paranoid spiral. And me, the reader, is like vacillating between these two interpretations from moment to moment. That was incredibly effective. And I think that's what he was going for. Like on the level of like, what effect is he going for? I think that's what he's going for.
Yeah. I agree, because like, I think one of the things that does kind of vacillate as you're reading the book is like, should I feel bad for the governess or should I feel bad for the children? And because I agree with you, Miles, like, there are moments in this book where he like decides to go outside in the middle of the night and then just stand there looking up at the house. And when she confronts him about this, he's like, I just did it to prove to you that I could be bad. So you'll know that I could be bad. And it's like, what the fuck? Like that why? But then I think it's another fair read to be like, well, he's a mischievous little kid, right?
Yeah.
And he just like was doing what little kids do, which is they're pushing their boundaries. He has a new parental figure in his life. And he's just testing her, and he's pushing the boundaries, and he's seeing what she'll allow him to get away with and what she won't.
Yeah.
And like, that doesn't have to have any sinister meaning to it. It doesn't have to be him hiding anything. Like, you're so right. The scene where they're walking to the church, where like, the way James writes this, it's so good, because he writes it as this like big final moment of confrontation. He writes it as this, there's been this tension between the governess and Miles for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it's all led up to this final moment, and finally we're just going to have it all in front of us, and the truth is going to be revealed that Miles knows about the ghosts, and he's been communicating with the ghosts, and the ghosts are trying to get his soul, and he's actively participating in it. And then what the conversation is so when am I going to go back to school? And like, that's the moment where she's like, oh my God, this is it. And like, again,
he's checkmated me. It's
right.
What?
And again, I think there is an interpretation, like, if you fully buy into her part of the narrative, that like, he fully knows that he's been expelled from school and he's fucking with her again. And testing her and seeing what power he has over her. And then there's just an interpretation that, hey, maybe the school didn't inform the child when he was expelled. They just sent a letter home to the parents, the father, to the uncle, actually. And the kid doesn't actually know he's been expelled from school. And like, again, there are choices that Henry James makes here where like, she has like this strong aversion to asking the kid, just asking forthright, like, what did you do to get expelled? Like, for like weeks go by, and she just like can't draw up the courage, and all she can do is talk to Mrs. Grose about like, well, have you ever seen anything? Has he ever done it? Like, he seems like a perfectly like, what possibly could he have done to, and like, he just never asked the kid. And then when she does finally ask the kid, he deflects and doesn't really say anything. He kind of admits that I said some things to people and they didn't like that.
Yeah, I think she has this never quite fully articulated metaphysics in her mind that's like, she can never just directly say anything to the kids about what's going on, or dot dot dot. Like, it's very unclear to us, the reader, what she imagines would happen if that confrontation were to happen. She seems to believe that if it were stated explicitly between them, then this would like open the door to the evil spirits or something. Like, again, I think it's intentionally left confusing and vague, and in her mind is just this huge amorphous terror, and it keeps her, like you said, keeps her from saying anything the whole time while she's spending all this time around them. One thought that I've had since finishing the book was like, and I've never seen an adaptation of this book, so I have no idea if anyone has taken this tack, but like, one really deeply scary way of doing this as an adaptation would be, you literally just do it from the perspective of the kids. And you simply have this governess who stares with this like fixed expression of terror across the lake for a while, and the little girl notices this and like starts playing a little bit more awkwardly because she detects that the governess is being weird.
Yeah.
And then in the governess's mind, this is the little girl trying to distract her from the apparition across the lake. In the governess's mind, that's what was happening in that scene.
Yeah.
And really it just becomes increasingly uncomfortable for the children. And what really kind of left me with a sick feeling, like the book affected me, honestly, because it ends very abruptly with the little boy dying.
Yeah.
And if you just look like straightforwardly at that scene, it's like she's like holding on to him super tightly, and then he dies, and you're like, you killed him. She killed the kid. And
yes.
like that's horrifying. Like I felt incredibly bad for these kids and this little boy in particular.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this is one of those things that it makes it so difficult when you're reading literature from a long time ago, because you're not sure if you are coming at this with the perspective of the character that is informed by modern times. But like, this woman came off to me as like so tightly wound and so intense and like over intense about everything. Like when she meets the children, they're just the best children in the world, and she's like immediately obsessed with them, and she like her and the little girl are inseparable, and like to the point where like, I don't know, is this Henry James saying something to me about what type of person this is, or is this just matching the style of the time, and also just like she's just really excited about her new job, and like I don't know, and that's the difficulty sometimes of approaching stuff that was written this long ago.
I definitely lean a certain direction. I definitely lean toward what you just said, that this is an unusually intense woman. I think there's a lot of stuff like similarly along similar lines, the idea that like she meets this charming man. She's obviously in the market for a husband. She meets this charming man who totally lays it on thick. And she's like, oh, I've basically fallen in love with this guy. Yeah. And then he's like, I have work for you. And she's like, that's wonderful. This will be an excuse for us to keep this relationship going. And he's like, it's in the countryside. And one of the explicit requirements is you never, ever, ever contact me for any reason ever again. And I'm never going to come there.
Yeah.
Bye. and then she just like, stoically is like, okay, this is my charge.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
This is my life, and just, like, the way she reacted to that struck me as like, okay, yeah, she's so suppressed. And, yeah.
And is that supposed to be a specific thing to her, or is this supposed to be like, this is the hard part, is this, she's a reflection, and what Henry James likes to do is talk about women and how like women are suppressed and oppressed and wound tight by the system they're forced to operate it. I mean, I think the answer to all these questions is kind of yes, but it is just like, it is really interesting to me that, like reading this book in 2025, I'm just like, I refuse to believe that none of this was intentional by the author, right? Like, I just refuse to believe, and like we have our saying, the author's a genius and everything is intentional. So like, of course we're going to believe that, but like just reading the text and just being absorbed in this, in the very specific style of this book, and we'll talk about that in a bit, and the things that are happening and what she's doing, I'm like, yeah, he's doing all this on purpose. Like you're absolutely right. When she sees the ghost of the previous governess across the way, and like she's like, and suddenly I knew that the little girl knew about it because she was turned away from her playing, and I'm just like, huh? What?
Yeah.
That's your evidence? Uh-huh. And like, and even like, even when she goes to Mrs. Grose and about these two people she's seen, and like the one, I guess, concrete bit of evidence that she is actually seeing these ghosts is that when she describes them, Mrs. Grose is kind of just like, oh yeah, that's definitely Quint. And that's definitely Miss Jessel. Like the people you have just described match the descriptions of the former governess and the valet of I don't even know what the guy's name was, the boss.
Yeah. Bly.
Sure. And like, that's a convincing argument, but if you actually go back and like read the text of what is described, it's like very generic and vague. It's like a man of a certain age, who's wearing clothing above his station, and it's like, okay, that's very non-specific, actually.
Yeah. So I didn't go back and reread this, I guess because this didn't even occur to me until right now, honestly. But or I guess it occurred to me earlier today. But anyway, point is, the character of Mrs. What's her name?
I said Grose, but did you
Grose.
listen to the audiobook on this one?
Yeah, Grose. Yeah, Mrs. Grose. Okay. The character of Mrs. Grose is very interesting, and we can't talk about this thing that you're mentioning right now without talking about Mrs. Grose, because
yes,
Mrs. Grose plays a very interesting role in this story, where she is an unwitting enabler of everything going wrong with our protagonist.
Yeah,
she is her like superstition and kind of like mental weakness is just, she just goes along with everything that this stronger, kind of more forceful, more tightly wound woman is saying, reinforcing the delusion, feeding into it, kind of adding her own commentary, like, oh yeah, and that would make sense because and then like something that isn't actually she always contributes things that aren't actually evidence. They're just like normal weird stuff that can happen like she never sees her experience as anything supernatural herself. She just is a person who is very easily swayed by things. And the scenes where, like you're describing, where she's describing to Mrs. Grose the apparitions, I almost feel like those are meant to be a sort of cold reading, like accidental cold reading, where Mrs. Grose is like giving her cues. Again, it's not so overt that it was obvious, but the way that Mrs. Grose leads her on, I think, is one way of putting it. Not maliciously. She doesn't know she's doing it, but she is also swept up in this drama of there being supernatural forces preying on the children, and so she kind of feeds stuff to the narrator that the narrator can then say, yes, that's exactly right, and it just builds this tower of delusion between the two of them. I think the way the story is written, I don't even know that the narrator gets into nearly as bad a place as she does if Mrs. Grose isn't there, kind of egging her on in her own way.
I think you're right. But I think this is also a really interesting position to put this woman, the housekeeper, in, right? Like technically, the governess is she's the governess. She's the head of the household, right? She is in charge of this household. She's in charge of the care of the children. She's in charge of the care of the house. And generally I think it's like a dotted line boss. Like, she's not technically like a solid line boss of Mrs. Grose, but like she is a station above her, kind of. She's placed in a position of power above her. And so you can kind of imagine the situation where Mrs. Grose is a woman living in this world also, who has this job and wants to keep her job. She wants to stay employed and paid. And this woman comes and she starts acting kind of weird. And like moments where like you see her just like peeking in through the window at you, and she scares the shit out of you, and you ask her what she's doing out there, and she's like, well, I saw someone else out here. Who? I just some man. And so like you kind of like I think it's this kind of mutual egging on, and also this woman, Mrs. Grose, perhaps feeling a lot of immense pressure to kind of go along with this stuff. But then I think, importantly, like when, as you said, when like the chips are down, when they're standing there by the lake, and the governess is screaming about the ghost standing there across the lake looking at us right now, Mrs. Grose is like, I don't see anything. There's nothing there. And that's a really interesting point too, because like if Mrs. Grose was not there, and if it was just the I keep forgetting that she doesn't have a name, the governess and Flora, if it was just the two of them, then you could make the argument is like, oh, well, Flora's lying because this is part of the game. The little children are playing with this woman. This is part of their manipulative game. And so, yes, she does definitely see her, but she's going to say she doesn't. But then Mrs. Grose is there, and she's not playing this game. So she doesn't see her. She just doesn't see her.
I think that the most sort of overt sign in the whole book to me that this woman is kind of making these things up was the way the girl Flora reacts to her outburst here, where she's like, "This woman scares the hell out of me. Please take me away from her."
Yeah.
And Mrs. Grose does, and that's like the last we see of her, as far as I can recall.
Yeah, and there's moments in the book where, like, you know, she gets up in the middle of the night and goes outside, and that's when she sees Quint on the bottom of the stairs, and that really freaks her out. And then she goes back to bed, and Flora is gone, and it's like, oh my God, where's Flora? Where's Flora? And it turns out Flora is behind the curtains, and it's like, what are you doing? And the narrator is immediately like, oh, she's there to looking out the window to look for the ghosts. Maybe she's just hiding from you because you scare the shit out of her.
Yeah.
Like it's just like it's perfectly logical explanations. And I think it is one of the joy of this novel to me that they're both there. And I have my way I lean. I think just like we had the ways we leaned about Hill House. But I think it is almost more fascinating to me, not what our interpretations of the book are, but like we talked about earlier, the fact that it seems like our interpretation of the book was one that didn't come for many, many years. And I like, if our interpretation is correct, that Henry James like desired all of this, like that he did this intentionally, how frustrating would it be as an author when you're just like, really? Y'all aren't getting this?
It makes me wonder if that's true.
Yeah.
Just one second before I follow that up. The audiobook was read by Emma Thompson.
Oh, so lovely.
It's one of my favorite audiobook experiences, honestly, because she really gives it her all. Yeah. By the way, she does, like, if you were to listen to the parts when she does the little boy voice, it's like a mildly creepy kind of lilting little boy voice where you could read into it sinister toying with you vibes, but also you could read into it playful, he's a little kid and he's just messing around vibes. Like that's the ambiguity is in the performance is one thing I just wanted to say.
Yeah. I mean, like first of all, I think that matches the setting of the book, right? Yeah. That we're experiencing all this from the perspective of the governess. She's writing in first person, so like the boy, any performance of the boy should match that POV. But also, like, it is perfectly plausible that this kid is actually like a little shit, and he could be a little shit. That doesn't mean that ghosts exist, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
I mean, like the book doesn't go into this a lot, but these are two children whose parents have died, whose uncle wants nothing to do with them, whose first governess died mysteriously. We actually never learn what actually happened to Miss Jessel. And we learn that Quint was just like found dead on the road, because they think he got drunk and tripped and fell and hit his head. And we leave that completely ambiguous.
Yeah.
And so like, he's just been a kid that's like gone through some shit, and it seems like got expelled from school just for like talking, like being kind of a prick to his fellow students. So like, I think he might understandably just be kind of a misbehaving little kid who's smart enough to know how to play the game and like be the perfect angel in some moments, and then push the envelope as he wants to.
Yeah, basically just a normal kid, really. I mean,
exactly. Yeah,
I think you're right. We were on a point just before that. Oh yeah, the interpretation. So you and I were kind of joking around this afternoon because it's like the way people talk about this book, it's as though they think people invented the concept of talking about books in about 1930. Because they invented something called structural criticism, and before structural criticism, there was just no way you could have noticed that this book had an ambiguity at its core. And it's like, shut up. Like, people have always talked about books. You were the one who said to me, actually, like, yeah, and when Moby Dick came out, people were like, wow, that was a great book about a whale. You know, it's like, no. There has always been an appreciation for metaphor and layered theming. The fact that a book like Moby Dick was written during that time just proves like people were thinking about this stuff, perhaps even more so back then than they are now. The idea of there being ambiguity and subtlety in a work of that time is like, of course, people knew about this and were looking for it. I think it's really just like, people didn't necessarily see it as like an academic pursuit that you wrote essays about.
Sure.
Possibly. and so they didn't. There's not like a record of the fact that plenty of people read the book and probably had a, not necessarily like literally our reaction to it, but some kind of appreciation for like, God, he had me on the edge of my seat because I could never tell exactly what was real and what wasn't. And even now, having finished it, I still don't. And they don't say like, they're not having a discussion where the aim is to unwind the author's intent necessarily, but they're perceiving that, and they're able to reflect that back. I just believe that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes when we talk about literature and history, we speak in a lot of very broad generalities. Like, I mean, for example, one of the things that is said about Henry James is that he, like, I think if you Google him, one of the lines about him is that he's this key transitional figure between literary realism and literary modernism. And you're like, okay, but what the fuck does that actually mean when we say things like that? And it's just like there was a trend in the 1900s for this literary realism, which like basically like translated into English just means people were really interested in writing books about regular people doing regular people things. That's it, right? It's just realism in the most basic explanation of just, this is just stories about people doing people things. And it's like, I think sometimes we look at that stuff and we go like, oh, that's like all people were writing about then. And it's like, that's not true, right? Like for example, if you look at like the YA trends of the last 40 years in our literature, you will notice several big trends of the types of stories that are most popular. But that certainly doesn't mean that no other types of stories were being written at the time. It's just we tend to look at big, large swings, and there was this large movement towards this feeling of realism, and then it eventually moved into this broad term that we call modernism, which is this incredibly broad, like looking up the definition of what like literary modernism is just like it's just like every book you've read that came out in the 20th century is modernist in some way. So
right.
But broadly, just talking about, I think one thing that is true about Henry James, and I think is true about this book, is that it is kind of trying to push against the structure of like how we write stories in several ways. One of the ways, I think, what we're talking about that he's using, like, people call this a Gothic novel, and I don't think that's like necessarily wrong, but it's also like, it's missing a lot of like the core tropes of what you would think a Gothic novel is, right? There's not really any romance at its core. It's structured much different. It's just like I've heard several ways this is like one of the Gothic novels, and I just kind of disagree with that. I think it's taking a lot of ideas from Gothic novels that came before, and it's using that general structure. But I would say Hill House is closer to a Gothic novel than this is ultimately. But again, these terms are very loose and flowing. Anyway, like, I don't think Henry James said, "I am going to write a Gothic novel."
No, I think you're spot on there. I mean, I think probably, again, my attempt at a mild mind meld with the author across the years is like, he, like all novelists, he probably read a lot of stuff, and he was like, I really liked this element, and I like this element, and I like how this worked, and I like how this made me feel, and I like all these things, and I think there's something here where I can combine all these elements into this original thing where we really emphasize the idea of like the uncertainty over whether what you're perceiving is even happening, and that itself being a huge source of anxiety, because I was just in my house this evening, was watching something on TV where there may or may not have been a face hugger on the TV, let's say a face hugger and some skittering on the television, and then I turned off my TV because that show was over, and then I heard a noise in my kitchen. And immediately, I just assume there's a face hugger in my kitchen, right? And like, there's not. There's not a face hugger in your kitchen, but you hope there's not a face hugger in your kitchen, but like, you still feel that sting of fear. I bring this up, first of all, because it's funny and you can laugh at me, but also because like, nobody ever actually sees a full what do they call it in Ghostbusters? A full torso apparition.
Yeah.
Like what happens in real life is if you see something, it's like it's always ambiguous, and then you're stuck with that ambiguity and that uncertainty, and the fear of it is a fear that's mingled with uncertainty and lack of clarity and worry
Yeah.
about whether you're making it up or whether you're going crazy or whether it's wishful thinking, which is honestly a much more psychologically resonant and in some sense horrifying feeling than like, oh, there is a ghost.
Yeah.
It's like it's funny. I'm not scared of ghosts. I'm scared of going crazy. Right. That's a much more. That's actually a much more modernist fear. Right. Like
Sure.
That's what makes it. That's what makes it modernist in a way. I would say is a distrust of the mind.
Yeah, I think so, and I think that's one good point that the ghosts in The Turn of the Screw are unlike a lot of gothic novels or horror novels, we'll call them, like ambiguous in their like mundanity. Like they don't appear as like see-through apparitions or floating as full torso vapors. They just look like people. It is just like the only, and I think this is interesting, the only thing that like pushes her towards this is some sort of phantom or ghost is that he disappears, or it doesn't make sense how he's there at that moment, and I didn't see him leave, and I don't know how we got there. And I think sometimes literally Quint just disappears in front of her eyes. But other than that, they present as just, they look like human beings. There's none of the like the distinguishing features that we would tend to look for if we're thinking that there are ghost people around.
Yeah, that's
and
a good
I
point.
think that again is intentional. I think that's part of exactly what you're talking about, is that like what if there's a person in the room right now and he looks like a person and he feels like a person, and that's like, well, that's like one, she has these feelings that come over her. Like the first time she sees the ghost of Quint, she's walking home one day and she's thinking about that, I'm going to turn the corner and I'm going to walk up this path and there's going to be a man there and he's going to be a very attractive man and he's going to say hello to me. And like, she's just kind of daydreaming about a chance encounter with a dude because she wants to be with someone, right? You already talked about that. And then suddenly she finds it completely disturbing that she gets the feeling that a person is going to show up, but not the person she wants it to be. And then suddenly she looks up, and in one of the towers of the manor, there's just a man standing there. And it's a man she doesn't recognize. She doesn't know. She's a woman alone in this place. Like, right. That's the other thing. Like, it's Mrs. Grose. We don't see Mr. Grose, I don't think, ever. There is, I think, Luke, who's like a character mentioned a few times but never actually seen at all. So there's two children, there's Mrs. Grose, and there's her, and then suddenly there's a strange man in the manor. That in and of itself, whether it's a ghost or not, is terrifying. Who is this man? Why is he in the home that I'm responsible for? Am I going to have to deal with a man in here that doesn't want to leave? And what does that mean? And all the pressures and fear of that. And it's just like you could just say that the ghosts are just metaphor, right? Like that whether they're real or not, they're metaphor for just the anxieties and the pressures that this woman is under.
Sure. I think you're right. I mean, you could, I feel like you could definitely write an essay on the idea that Quinn is a metaphor for like patriarchal oppression, and the woman, I space on her name, is a metaphor. Miss Jessel is a metaphor for like the matriarchal oppression, because these are two vectors that this woman is suffering under, both of them equally. I mean, one of them is more external, sort of externalized pressure upon her, and one of them is more internalized pressure that she puts on herself. And if I were to make this case, I would say, well, yeah, the patriarchal specter is haunting the boy because it's passing its demonic, you could say, influence into the boy and turning him into a tool of the self-perpetuating patriarchal complex. And then Miss Jessel is the matriarchal sort of the thing that it is that causes her to be so uptight and causes Mrs. Grose to be so kind of mentally broken is the thing that is now pushing itself on this girl. And this, again, whether it's real or in her mind or a metaphor, it kind of doesn't matter. The ideas, I think, are there in the text. Like, I think I think all of this is very much in the text.
And I have to believe that it's there intentionally. Like, I just this is the thing that, and I know we've gone back to this several times throughout this conversation, but it just seems so wild to me that James wouldn't have put it there on purpose. And the idea that nobody analyzed the book this way until 1953 or something, it seems so just patently absurd to me.
Yeah.
And I really like it. Like, I mean, that's one thing I don't think we've said throughout this conversation. Did we enjoy reading this book? And like, I think I did. I think I did, because I was picking up on all these complicated things the book was doing. I will say, the language of the book can be very difficult. The prose of the book can be very difficult. I think this is, this book came out in 1898. This is near the tail end of Henry James's career. I think he continued to write after this. I think he died in like 1913 or something like that. So he's got, a decade and a half left of life, and I think he basically continues to write until he dies. And I think some people segment, I read, his career to like 3 phases, and this is like the end of the second phase. It's like the third phase is when he really starts to push the envelope of like structure, and I mean structure broadly and like how to structure a story, but structure acutely and like how he structures sentences. Like, he really started pushing the envelope of that late in his career, and this is kind of the beginning of that. And this is another one of those things that is difficult to talk about when you are reading a book that's over 100 years old, because it is so much more difficult to recognize style when you are reading an old book versus a contemporary book, right? Because there's a very easy trap you can fall into here, where you read this book and you just say, oh, this is difficult to read, and this is just how everyone wrote books in 1898. And actually, that's not true, right? Like, this is, and certainly if you read a lot of books from the 19th century, they did write very differently from the way we wrote. But this book in particular is doing a lot of very specific stylistic things, and it's doing stuff that James late in his career got very well known for. And it's intentionally constructing very long sentences, lots of commas, lots of clauses, and almost like a misordering of noun and verb, where sometimes he will put the noun, the subject of the sentence, at the very, very end of the sentence, and you'll have to go through all of this explanatory stuff until you get to the thing that she's actually talking about. And this is like not just, hey, this is how people wrote in 1898. This is Henry James doing a thing, and he does this a lot. And he's actually very well known, if you look, like, especially his later stuff, at being very difficult to parse, very difficult to read. I have a question for you about this, because I wonder if this is a style thing that just works much better in audiobook. And the reason I'm asking this question is, there were a lot I had to do. Like, this book was, I think, 120 something pages, this novella. I had to do a lot of rereading at times, because I would catch myself like reading sentences but not actually parsing and understanding them. And one thing that happened to me is I think I was in the car, in the passenger seat of my car, like driving home, and my son was watching me read this book, and it's like, Daddy, read to me what you're reading. And so I started reading. I read like a page of this book out loud, and I found that the language was working so much better on me reading it aloud. Probably because I was slowing down and actually listening to the words and listening to the construction and absorbing what it sounds like. But what was your reaction to the audiobook?
Yeah, so I think I'll try to give like a balanced response here, because yes, it's far more easy to digest when it's being read aloud, because Emma Thompson is doing the work of emphasizing the words that need to be emphasized and putting the right intonation on things, so you're able to sort of spool it back up as she's unspooling it, to use a metaphor that I don't know if that makes any sense, but you've got to take this sequence of words, right? And you've got to figure out, like, where are we going with this sequence of words, and he write. So the thing is, even Emma Thompson can't make it perfect for you, and I think it's intentional, because it's like he's sort of in a way keeping you in suspense, because you're like you said, it's like I'm on this garden path, and you have written the sentence somehow such that like the subject or like the crucial verb that determines the meaning of the sentence are at the end of the sentence. So I have to keep this whole long sentence like in superposition in my mind until it ends, and then it like collapses down to have an actual meaning. Whereas this is like the opposite of how we're told to write. Like we're told to write simply, and the sentence should be as long as it needs to be and no longer. And you should sequence the words in an order where they're easily interpreted. You write to be easily interpreted and unambiguous and understood. And I think he's doing the opposite of that. I mean, I think he is writing to sound musical, because it can sound very musical.
Yeah.
But also not just musical. It can sound very strained and kind of, especially when she starts going on her like paranoid meanderings, and the sentences get really long.
Yeah.
That amps up the sense of like discursive, rambling, internal lack of coherence. The sentence itself is not coherent, but like you're having to strain so hard to parse it that it feels like this person is on the edge.
Yeah. It works beautifully, because this book, like it's so fascinating to me that like the things that objectively happen in the story are not very scary or not very tense, with a couple of exceptions that we've already talked about. But like the way he writes the stuff can make it tense. Like again, the first time she sees Quint, she's just walking home, and it's like it's a nice afternoon. She's on a nice walk, and she looks up, and there's just a man there, and I don't know who this man is. And like from the perspective of a man in 2025 who's read a lot of horror, there's nothing particularly like unnerving about that. Like I'm not saying I don't understand her being unnerved by it, but I'm like, the emotional reaction of me reading those sentences is like, oh, okay, there's a guy there, sure. But the way James writes it is that he like loops us through this journey of her sentences and how she's explaining this, and it is so off-putting at times, and so difficult at times, and so you lose yourself a little bit. That the end result is you are so kind of unmoored from a clear picture of what's happening that it puts you in this constant state of discomfort. And I kind of love that. I mean, it's difficult. Like it's a challenge to read, certainly. Like again, I read this 120 pages, like probably 2 times slower than I would read Stephen King, for example. It's challenging to read, and I found myself having to reread. But yeah, like it does kind of put me in this low state of tension throughout, even if nothing tense is even happening in the moment. One of the things that I think very interesting, like this is less of a specific sentence structural choice, but more of a broad structural choice of the story. I find it so weird that for so much of the early part of the story that is about this woman taking care of the children, the story refuses to put us in a scene with the children. Like the first 30 or 40 pages of this thing is just her talking about how the lessons with the kids are going, and talking about how Miles is behaving, and talking about how Flora is behaving. And it doesn't let us see any of that. And so the story is like kind of saying, you got to take her word for it, because I'm not going to demonstrate this. And eventually, finally, we do get there. But I just found myself like pushing against the book. Is like, when are we going to actually hang out with Flora and Miles? When are we going to do that? It's kind of crazy to me that we haven't done that yet. And again, that's a conscious choice that the story created, that the structural conceit of the story created in the way the Governess is relaying the story to us via writing it all down afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it just for me just ultimately created this, like, I never felt confident in anything.
Yeah.
I read a sentence. Did I really understand that sentence? Did I miss something? Is there something layered in there that I didn't pick up on? Maybe.
I experienced that even with the audiobook, just like, I think I follow what she's saying here. I like what you said about us not really getting to see the kids. I think there's a really interesting thing going on where it's very important to her that she see the children as like just the most perfectly angelic beings that ever existed. I read something about how one of the things that James does is he plays with these sort of Victorian conceptions of the purity and innocence of children, because as two men who have children, they're little goblins. They're
Yes.
they are innocent in the sense that they do not know the evil of the world. That's true, but this does not mean that they are angelic. And and that's not a flaw either. This isn't me saying like children are little monsters and I don't like them. It's me saying the kind of creature that children are is a little mischievous goblin that will do whatever it can get away with and manipulate and lie, and you have to educate them out of that behavior, right?
Yeah. And often do it in a way that's not like a child doesn't say, I'm going to, like what we said about Miles is perhaps like pushing it and seeing what he can get away with and lying and manipulating all these stuff. Often I don't think they're even like consciously aware that they're doing that. It's just like behavior. Like it's like we're going through a thing with my son right now where he's just like not listening, and like we've have a long conversation with him about not doing thing X, and then like 10 minutes later he'll do thing X. And it's like, it's so frustrating as an adult when you're like, I just told you not to do the thing, you're not supposed to do the thing, and then you did the thing. And it's like, well, it's not like he's like walking up to the line and then saying, haha, I am going to cross this line and break this rule. He's just in that moment not thinking about the rule, and then it's like you remind him about the rule and he's like, oh yeah, the rule. It's just like that their brains are not fully complete yet.
And there's also like learning tact, learning social rules. I mean, one thing that I've seen a bunch in my my kids as they went from kind of 8 to like 12-ish was like they would say something mean, but they were trying to be funny. I mean, I mean, adults do this sometimes actually, so it's not like it's unique to children. But like,
sure,
like the line of like, I wasn't trying to be hurtful. I was trying to be playful and banter, and you miss it, right? So there's all these subtleties of like, what's the difference between lying and tact? It's like it's nothing. There's no difference between lying and tact. It's just you have to be so good at it that it's not lying, and then it becomes tact, right? So that's all of this stuff is happening. So like I said a second ago, she has such an unrealistically high expectation and sense of their behavior and sense of them as these angelic perfect beings that it can't admit to any faults. And so when the kid starts being normal, she's like, Satan has arrived. And like, I feel like there is a like meta, there's like a commentary level of this where it's like, do you see what happens when you have unrealistic expectations of the behavior of children is you infer ridiculous things into normal childish behavior.
Yeah. That's a great point. And it's like one thing that I think is so interesting, like even if you take the book on its face value, which is that these are ghosts and they're really there, the ghosts don't ever do anything, right? Like the most they do is stand there. Are like even if the governess is correct that the ghosts are there and they are both interested in their corresponding, that Quint is interested in the boy, that Miss Jessel is interested in the girl, there's never a moment in the book where they're like, the ghosts are like evilly like whispering into the ear of the children and trying to manipulate them. Like the most we see them do is just like stand at a distance and look at them longingly.
Right.
And so like all of like everything that is the governess's decision, what these ghosts want and what they're trying to do, is complete supposition. It's her making a whole lot of assumptions based on behavior and what you just said, based on the idea that if a child were to do anything bad, it must be because some external influence on them. It can't be just a kid being a kid.
Behavioral developmental processes. Yeah.
And I think this is something Henry James is very specifically doing, is looking at I think he spends a lot of time looking at class and class structure and how we assume the worst of people that fall out of their class. Because one of the interesting things, we haven't really talked about Quint and Miss Jessel yet. We're kind of told by the book that these two people that are now dead had a relationship going on. And one of the reasons why the governess decides that Quint is no good and was bad, and he's this roguish bad guy, that his, even as a ghost, his influence on these children must be very bad, is he was hitting above his station, essentially. Mm-hmm. That by trying to be with, but that being with the Duchess, or the governess, she was better than him. He is of the lower class. He should not do that. And the fact that he was doing that represented some break in what is normal and what is expected. And so he's a bad guy. Like, he's not he doesn't know his place. He doesn't belong, and he's a bad guy. And then the other piece of evidence is the fact that Miss Jessel and Quint hung out with the children a lot, right? So she's the governess. It's her job to hang out with the children, and the current governess is also hanging out with the children all the time. Like, she makes it a point to say, I am never apart from these children. And like, Quint could have just been like a dude that like really liked these kids and like helping out his girlfriend, take care and teach the kids.
Right. Maybe you just said this, we said it a while ago, that these are orphans.
Yeah.
Probably desperate for a father figure.
Yeah, and their uncle basically shipped him off to the country because he wanted nothing to do with them.
Right, which means that these were basically their surrogate parents who died after their real parents died.
Yeah.
And now they have a new surrogate mom who is sort of not like, she is actually aware of the gravity of this responsibility, and it's like crushing her, actually.
Yeah.
But she sees it as like this holy calling, basically, but she's torn in so many directions, because it's like, this wasn't her view of what her life was going to be. Was like, I'm going to be a mom to these kids and never have a man in my life again.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's so, torn apart by the duty of it. Yeah, no, I like what you were pointing out, though, that like I didn't quite think about it. I just kind of this is one area where I just kind of uncritically absorbed Mrs. Grose's perspective, that these were just like some real shady characters, and it's like, yeah, their crime was to fall in love.
Yeah.
And now they're Satanists. Yeah.
Yeah. It's good stuff. I did want to talk to you. One more thing I definitely wanted to make sure we hit is kind of the structural conceit of the book. Mm-hmm. So we haven't really talked about this yet, but the book opens with a bunch of people on Christmas at a party telling each other ghost stories. And we joked about it in the intro, but essentially what happens is some unnamed person goes, but I have the worst ghost story you've ever heard of, actually. But I can't tell it because it's written down and I have to go get it. But come check back in like 3 days and then we'll tell this ghost story. So all that happens. He goes and sends for the book. He gets the book back. He sits everyone down again and he reads the story. So that is kind of the structure that the book has presented us with. One thing I find really fascinating about this, and I think something that someone writing this exact same story in 2025 absolutely would have done, is we would have ended looping back on that setup structure. Like, we would have gone back with the people as he finished the story and shut the book and had like a coda moment with those people that kind of would have perhaps revealed the purpose of layering the story in this structure in the first place, right? Because, I mean, maybe this is just something you needed to do to tell ghost stories, or maybe this is Henry James specifically wanting to put people in the frame of reference of, I'm going to tell you a ghost story, to put the structure on it. But it is just so interesting to me that the book just very abruptly ends, as you said. Like, she looks down. The last line of the book is that the boy was not breathing, and then we're done.
Yeah. I think what you just said there, where it's basically like, all right, calm down. This is not going to be a boring story about a governess. There's going to be ghosts. All right, now we begin.
Yeah.
I think that was probably important to the audience retention in that era.
Yeah.
But there is a definite interesting tone of almost like sarcasm around, like authorial sarcasm, because that part of the story, it is not the first person narrative. So it is not in the voice of the governess. It is in the authorial voice. It is in the narration voice.
Yeah.
And there's like a cynicism about like these shitty people sitting around just enjoying these stories of macabre stories of suffering and trying to outdo each other to, and they're genuinely enjoying, like, the worse the story, the more nightmarish the fate, the happier they are. And I thought it was really interesting, like a kind of surprising self-awareness for something this old. And it's like, yeah, Matt, you're just doing the thing again where you pretend people in the past were stupid children, and I know they're not, but like the framing story really made that evident to me. One interesting thing about the framing story that I wouldn't have noticed if I hadn't kind of like gone back and refreshed myself on it is the okay, so you've got this, the character who's reading us the manuscript is named Douglas.
Yes.
And it's a manuscript written by his sister's late governess. So I guess we're meant to assume that she went on to become governess for someone else after the events of this story. Which,
so she like killed a kid, and then said it was ghosts.
Yeah.
And then successfully dodged the penalty of that, and then was hired to be someone else's
right.
I mean, I guess your rap sheet didn't travel as well back then, so you can just kind of move somewhere else.
But she wrote it down. and this kid apparently knew the story, meaning he had either read it or he at least heard the story, meaning she told people the story.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just thought that was a funny. You're probably right that to a degree it's just to do the necessity of like, how do I package this? But I just thought it was funny. My first thought, which is wrong because the character's name is not Miles. I was like, maybe this is Miles.
Yeah.
Miles is telling the story. It's like, no, Miles is dead.
Is super dead. Yeah. No, I like that. And I think it, like, there's, again, the structure of this being her recounting this thing is really interesting, because it's almost as if like she's doubling down on it, because there are multiple times throughout the story that the governess like says, like, I'm still convinced today as much as I was convinced back then that XYZ is happening. And so like, it is a really interesting idea that what James is planting into us is that even if you are questioning the legitimacy of what's happening, even if you are questioning the reliability of your narrator, even if you're wondering about the ambiguity at all, she is not. She is convinced utterly, even though this ended with the death of the child. And again, you would think if part of her reason of writing this down perhaps is trying to get her thoughts in order, or trying to make the argument, or trying to say that something supernatural, something paranormal happened here. Like this boy died from something happened to him as a result of these hauntings. You think she would put her own coda on it. You think she wouldn't end it with, and I looked down and he was dead.
Yeah.
So like it reads as, I mean, there's an argument here that it reads as part confessional, right? That perhaps on some deep level she knows that everything she's saying didn't actually happen.
Yeah.
And she's just confessing her sins, that I pushed these children, I prodded these children, I scared these children, and then ultimately, I was so possessive and controlling, and I held him too tight, and he suffocated to death.
Right.
I don't know.
I don't know either. Yeah, it's fascinating. It really is. I think I don't know. I guess going full circle, I think Henry James understood the effect that this would have to leave people discussing. I think this is one of the most time-honored of literary traditions is you create a character whose nature in some important way could be interpreted in two different ways. And then you get your readers to debate it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there are web serials that I could name where kind of the operative principle of why it's like a famous story is because people get to debate, like, was this action justified? And it's like, I don't know. What do you think? Was this character's perspective accurate? I don't know. That's what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. He knows that he can stay in our minds longer if it's not just a story, but if it's a story told from a perspective, and that perspective is not trustworthy. That's,
Yeah.
It works really well, and he executes it really well. So
I agree. And it makes something that I think is really there. Like, there's a reason why this story was adapted as many times as it was, because you have that kind of ambiguity. And if you're a creative, you read a story like this and you're like, oh, I really want to do something with this. I really think I have something to say here. And I think, obviously we're going to spend a lot of time on Bly Manor here in a month or so. And I think it's just like Hill House. It's just a setting and a story, like, rich with interpretive adaptation, especially in a television show format where you have a lot of time. You have a lot of time to spend on the governess. You have a lot of time to spend on the children. You have a lot of time to spend on Mrs. Grose, right? You can really explore these characters and talk, and a lot of the things that we read into the story that are perhaps in the subtext, but very buried in the subtext, and we talked about a lot of them today, maybe we could bring those to the surface a little bit and really pick at those and explore those and analyze those and talk about those. By the way, I'm saying this from the perspective of someone who definitely did watch The Haunting of Bly Manor, but remembers very little of it beyond the broad strokes of the narrative. I don't know why that is. Like, I enjoyed Bly Manor. I think if you like forced me at gunpoint to say which one I liked more, I would say I enjoyed Hill House more than Bly Manor. But I found Bly Manor beautiful and touching, and all the wonderful things we said about Hill House, I think it's just as true in this television show we're going to watch here in a little bit. But for whatever reason, it didn't stick in my brain as thoroughly and completely as Hill House did. And so I think this rewatch with you is going to be an experience for me as well, of kind of remembering and relearning and re-experiencing the show. So well, I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
The only other thing I wanted to make sure we hit, I just wanted to circle back around to what you said about the kind of the sneering, judging tone of the opening. And I just completely agree with you there. Like, I just think you're just right. There's a lot, like, one of the things that I was thinking about as I closed the book was the fact that I think Douglas says, like, you've heard a ghost story in which one person saw the ghost. Well, how about two turns of the screw? And he's talking about, like, two children witnessing these horrible events, and they're just so, like, cavalier about it. And what the story actually is a kid dies at the end of it, and, like, but that's like, oh, we're gonna have this is gonna be a really good one. This is gonna be a really good one, and it does, like, I wonder the rise of this kind of gothic horror, this kind of story in the time period. And one of James's reaction was like, man, that's kind of fucked up that y'all are, like, really into this stuff. Like, maybe he's just commenting on, like, just our innate human desire to, like, and we see it every time we turn on the news, of, like, see the bad shit that's happening in the world, and how much we love to absorb ourselves in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a Tool song about this.
Jesus Christ.
No, but I mean, like it's funny because apparently people have been aware of the gross interest that we have in the vicarious suffering of others for 100 and some odd years, 150. What? Yeah. So
I have to believe we've just always known this about ourselves on some level. I bet you can find writing back 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
stay the same.
I think the character of Mrs. Grose is also tied to this, where she's inside the story, obviously, but it's like she's both horrified, but also I think on some level it's sort of romantic to be part of a ghost story. It's sort of
Yeah.
exciting, right?
Yeah, I think it would not be wrong to say that she does kind of feed into the governess's stuff, because she's like, oh, that would be really interesting and weird. Like, we have ghosts at Bly. Like, there are ghosts here, and ooh. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think she's into it to a certain level.
Poor kids.
Poor kids, man. I hope poor Flora turns out okay. I'm sure she'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm sure she'll be just fine. After her parents and then her replacement parents and then her brother all died when she was a small child. Of course, that was par for the course back then, right?
Yeah. That happened to everybody.
Yeah.
What did you think about the part where Miles is perhaps threatening the governess of like, we should write my father about this type of stuff? And the governess's response to him is like some of the most like candid and honest she is, which is like, I don't think he'll care. I was like, oh, like it shocked me at how almost like change in tone it was, that her kind of flowery language and Henry James's long language construction just goes away, and she just says flat out, I don't think he'll much care about what's happening with you at all. It's just like his there. The reason I found this so interesting to me is because in some of her previous language in the book up until that point, it felt like she didn't fully recognize that he actually doesn't give a shit about his kids. Like the way she was writing about him and the interaction and like the idea of pulling him in and calling him in was less about him not giving a shit and more about, oh, he doesn't want me to reach out to him because he's recognized my great gift and power at this, and it's an opportunity to prove myself. Like he has so much trust in me that he doesn't feel the need to check in on me and check how things are going. And it felt like obviously bullshit, but this bullshit construction that she created for herself to justify both his kind of monstrous indifference toward these children and also the importance of her charge. And it just felt like delusional in a very specific kind of way. And then suddenly when Miles is pushing her on it, she just says, I don't think he'd much care about you. And it's just like, whoa, I didn't realize you realized that actually.
Well, what's fun about this is she still may not, because she might be just saying that because she doesn't want to give up her control of the children.
Sure.
But also, I mean, I as you were going through that, I was kind of like following along with your logic, and I was like, yeah, I mean, I think on some deeper level, she does know that this guy is a manipulative, sort of flighty guy who charmed her. Probably not even. He wasn't even like cynically trying to manipulatively charm her. He just like was an attractive, charming man. And he was like, you're perfect for this job I have over there. Never call me again. And that was his like entire intention with this reaction. And he really didn't want to be bothered with the kids because he's a swinging bachelor. And she knew this on some level, but was kind of in denial about it, but also deep down did know it. So I think her saying that to him was, basically just her kind of cracking a bit, acknowledging the reality of her situation. It's interesting though, like her writing, there's like layers of ambiguity, right? Where it's like she writes the letter and then leaves it somewhere. And when that happened, I was like, this is pretty important to you that this letter gets sent.
Yeah.
You're acting like it's not only unimportant, but you kind of hope that the letter doesn't make it there, which indeed it does not. And it's like, yeah, I think she didn't want to send a letter to him. I think she wanted to like control the situation because in her mind, she's the only one who can.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it is just like from the very beginning, one of the first things that happens is she gets a letter from Miles' school that says he's expelled.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a brief moment where she wonders, oh, should I reach out to him and like let him know that his nephew has been expelled from school, and suddenly my job is going to pretty dramatically change because I'm going to have to both take care of and teach both of these children, or even just ask the question, do you want him to go to a different boarding school? Like, what do you want for this child? Like, it's not really in my purview to like unilaterally make a decision on what the boy's education should be, and yet she chooses to kind of leave him out of that entirely. And perhaps the honest answer is he wouldn't actually give a shit one way or the other, but she just kind of makes that decision off of that. And like you could make an argument that like he said not to write me, he said to leave me alone, but this rises like above the level of like normal everyday stuff. It's like, you put the kid in boarding school, you're paying for boarding school for the kid. He's not going to be going to that boarding school anymore. You probably should want to know about that, but she just basically decides not to tell him.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. That's sort of like the beginning of a slippery slope that she gets on, where she's made some compromised decisions where now if the degree of her poor decision making is revealed, it will probably get her in big trouble and possibly fired.
And she knows that because she kind of, and either correctly or incorrectly, puts that on Miles, and is like, Miles is aware of that I've acted perhaps above my charge and made decisions that I perhaps shouldn't have made. And he knows that, and he's using that and putting that over me to assert his power. Now that could just be 100% true, or that could be her own level of guilt and anxiety being put on that kid.
Yeah. I think the maybe you don't even have to say it at this point, but I think the latter. I think that she is completely thrashed with anxiety of her, mostly of her own making, but just now, I mean, she's isolated. She isn't living the life she wants to live. All of her poor choices are compounding on her, and now it's this little kid's fault. Yeah.
He's got power over me because he said he wondered when he was going to go back to school.
Yeah.
And she's like, don't you want to stay here and do school here? And he kind of like, I mean, there is such a fun interpretation of this book where he's terrified of her.
Yeah.
And he's kind of like, well, no, I mean, it's like, I really, I like it here, but also like, you know, are you equipped to teach me the things I need to learn to become a man in this world?
How much longer was this going to be? Like until I'm 18 or?
Yeah. It's because I think at this point, like, it has moved to fall. Like it's one thing for, you try to put your head in this kid's your shoes. Like, he gets expelled. He comes home. There's a new governess here. It's summer. They're doing summer things. They're having fun. It's fun summertime. And he's like, I'll worry about like school and that stuff later. And then it gets to be like September. And you're like, okay, so like we're still like just doing the fun summer stuff. And she is like teaching, I think. She's sort of. And like you can kind of understand where in her mind it's this great moment of him finally like throwing the like the cover off the elephant that's been in the room the entire time. I think she even uses that metaphor, the elephant in the room, which I didn't know that was that old of a metaphor, but sure. And in him, it's probably it could just be like he's working up the courage to confront her about this thing because he's like, it's school time now.
Yeah.
I have to go to school, right?
Yeah. And she's like, well, you were expelled. I think this is a fascinating aspect of her character, really. It's fairly consistent that she's just incapable of saying like the hard truths, you know? Like she can't have difficult conversations with people.
Yeah.
It like it manifests in her inability to have to ever bring up the ghosts to the children, even though if she really believes there are ghosts, then she should do that.
Yeah, I don't think she ever just comes right out and says, until the moment with where it builds and builds and builds in the moment with Flora, she never just says like, hey, have you like seen a ghost?
Right.
Have you seen any people? Like, she just can't come right out and do it. And it's the same with the expulsion either. Like, she has multiple long conversations with Miss Grose about what possibly Miles could have done to get expelled. And never once in any of those conversations, it's like, hey, should we just like ask him?
Right.
And I think I think she says something like, I've tried to broach the subject with him before, and he like obfuscates and deflects and stuff like that. And it's like, but again, the way James writes it, we don't get to see those moments. We just get to see her telling of those moments.
Right. Yeah.
And then when she does finally just confront him about it, he does tell what happened, just in a very like kid protective kind of way, where like you're being accused of being bad and you kind of just shut down and just be like, well, I just said some stuff and made some people mad.
I mean, my interpretation is he probably doesn't even know what he said. I mean, maybe he said something about his dead parents that other kids found upsetting.
Maybe he's just being a bit too macabre, and they just find that inappropriate at the school. Yeah.
And that's I think the crucial thing of my interpretation, at least at the very end when he says it, is like he doesn't understand why. Like, he can't answer it because he doesn't know why.
Yeah.
Which is even sadder, really. It's like he wasn't, he didn't put a cherry bomb in the toilet. He said some things that made some kids uncomfortable or scared, and they were not things that he said to scare them. They were just things that that he needed to get off his chest, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's expelled for that, and that's incredibly cruel. That's like a classic thing you would expect from a boarding school, right? To expel a kid for like having trauma.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. These poor kids.
Yeah.
Poor Miles.
Right. I mean, just the final note on this is like, she really, by the end of the story, she has wound herself up to this point where she basically thinks both of these kids are these insidious, manipulative monsters who are completely two-faced, and their persona of sweetness and light and angelic perfection is 100% a mask that they're wearing. They're all Emperor Palpatine, and they're just pretending. They're just such good actors, and it's like that is insane. Like that's the most overt she's not in her right mind sort of textual thing to me, is just like her completely twisted sense of what's going on with these kids.
Yeah, but she makes it like essentially they're being possessed by the ghosts of these two despicable bad people. Like, because it is still like the way she does it is still like she is still very convinced that the kids are like these angelic, perfect Victorian children, as you mentioned. But it's this outside influence, this outside force that is essentially like, it is not Flora that is behaving this way. It is Miss Jessel, and Miss Jessel is influencing Flora to behave this way. And it is Quint on Miles, and that is exactly what's happening. And so it allows her to both still see the children as these perfect angelic beings that I just want to cradle and hold and protect, while also fully explaining why their behavior is like tightening the screws on her.
No, you're totally right, and I kind of forgot that element of things because it smacks so obviously of delusion, of just like your classic paranoid delusion, where it's like, well, anytime they're being good, they're the kids, and then anytime they're not being good, it's because they're being possessed. It's like it's the my theory can explain any observation type paranoia. So
perfect.
Yeah.
What a fun conversation. I like a challenging book to read. Obviously not going to go down as like my favorite book ever, but if this is what all of these short stories are going to be like, as far as the conversations they pull out in us, I think this is going to be a fun month covering this stuff. I'm excited.
Too. Awesome.
Yeah. So I guess that's a question for like we put these short stories in here. Again, like I said in the introduction, without really knowing if they're going to ultimately specifically relate back to The Haunting of Bly Manor or not, but just as an excuse to read some more literature, which is never a bad thing. But how are you feeling after reading The Turn of the Screw? Are you excited to then visit these 8 other stories we're going to be reading over the next month?
Yeah, I am.
Cool.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
I completely cop to having difficulty with the language, even audiobooking. There's parts where I'm just like, Jesus, like I'm having to master myself to get through this. But then there are these incredibly powerful moments, and there were several of them. It's not like the book. It's not like you had to slog through the whole book to get to some crescendo. It's like throughout the book, there are these moments of just like, oh shit, that made me feel something there. So,
Totally.
if we're reading a bunch of short stories are an art form that I love anyway. Short stories are great because they are like boiled down to punch you with like one particular idea, right? So, I mean, I anticipate this being a lot of fun to knock out a bunch of shorter stories.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be fun. So, I think that's going to do it for The Turn of the Screw. I really enjoyed this one, and I can't wait to revisit it once we get into The Haunting of Bly Manor proper.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah. So next week we begin our short stories. We are going to be reading 3 stories next week. Those 3 stories are The Great Good Place, The Two Faces, and The Way It Came. Just a reminder that those stories, the list of those stories, the list of all the stories we're going to be reading, and the schedule we're going to be reading them in is in the show notes. There's a link to a Google Doc which has the complete show schedule for you. And so you can always check what stories we're reading, which weeks. They're not necessarily in the order of like what are the show titles order. I really just kind of tried to space it to combine shorter stories together so we could knock this out as quickly as possible. So we've got 3 this week or next week. I think we've got just 1 short story the week after that, and then 2 and 2. And then we'll move on to the show. But awesome. I think this is going to be a lot of fun.
I am looking forward to it. All right,
Matt, we don't have any discussion answers to read, but we do have a question for our listeners. And I think after what we spent most of our conversation on this week, I think people are not going to be surprised by what this discussion question is.
That's right. The question is, what do you think? Were the ghosts real or not?
We basically asked one for Hill House, but it's another story in which that's a perfect question.
Yep.
Yeah. So let us know what you think.
Yeah. Remember, you can reach us via email at flanaganswakepod@gmail.com, on Twitter at flanaganswake19, and of course, the subreddit at reddit.com/r/doofmedia is the place to go answer that discussion question. You can also find all of our episodes over on YouTube.
That's right. And if you want to get some merchandise from Flanagan's Wake and from Doof Media, you can head on over to doofmedia.myshopify.com. You can get your awesome very own Flanagan's Wake mug to put your delicious blueberry tea in it like I'm doing. Or you can get a bunch of other kind of mugs, shirts, hats. I think I ordered a Tuesday hat. We have a hat that just says Tuesday on it. Like The Shining, Tuesday. It's really funny. Gotta get yourself a Tuesday hat. It is Tuesday. It is Tuesday today as we record this.
It is Tuesday. So I need to get my Tuesday hat to wear on Tuesdays.
Yeah. And there's a ton of stuff up there. We have some great artists making wonderful stuff for us. And we just want to share it with y'all. So check it out, doofmedia.myshopify.com.
Yeah, if you're the kind of person who made it through this episode, there's probably something over there that you would enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
If you like any of our shows and you want to support us, then please consider heading over to patreon.com/doofmedia. There's a ton of bonus content there, bonus episodes where we talk about Stephen King adaptations. We got a show where we're talking about the TV show From, and we're
very behind on that, by the way.
We are behind on that. I watched it. We can do it anytime.
Don't put this on me.
That's on you. It's on you now. As of this moment, we're releasing a new Patreon feature, like probably be released by the time this episode comes out.
This episode's coming out next week, so it definitely will be. If you want to go ahead and talk about it, we will have already officially announced it.
Yeah, I'll talk about it briefly here, but if you go to doofmovies.com, and that is a website that we have set up where you can vote on your favorite movies of the 21st century. And depending on the votes of the patrons on that website, that will determine what movies we cover next, over on the Doofcast, I believe.
Yeah, so I think we had the idea of doing like a 25 best in 2025, right? And I just want to say, for the record, we had this idea before the New York Times decided to do all their bullshit. They totally stole it from us, even though we didn't say anything about it. But we had this idea a while ago, and then it took a bit to set up because Matt has created this whole website and this whole code that is doing all this stuff. But yeah, the intent here is to kind of crowdsource from our listeners, especially our patrons, what are the 25 best movies of the 21st century. It's 2025. We're a quarter of the way through the century. Let's celebrate it by looking at those 25 movies. And like Matt said, doing episodes of our other show, the Doofcast, on the movies on that list that we happen to have not ever talked about or watched or any of that stuff. So it's going to be a lot of fun, I think.
So that you can play with the website even if you're not our patron, and you can kind of make your own list of your favorite movies. But if you are our patron, then your votes will be counted toward the movies that we cover. So that's the incentive there to join the Patreon. Yeah.
It's going to be really cool. I think it's going to be like the definitive list, right? By the end of this, we will have the Doof Top 25. It will reflect your choices, Matt. It will reflect my choices, but most importantly, the choices of all of our listeners.
That's right.
Our patrons.
Yep.
It's going to be cool. So yeah, check that out. What was that website again, Matt?
Doofmovies.com.
Oof. It's a good one. I love it. Of course, if you cannot afford to join us on Patreon, that is absolutely okay. As Matt said, you can still play with the website. It's just your list will not count towards the overarching list. That's something exclusive for our patrons. But there are tons of other ways you can also help us out. We will always ask that you share the podcast with friends, with people that enjoy Mike Flanagan, and maybe even people that like really enjoy Henry James. We're in our Henry James section right now, so if you have some real James heads out there, maybe they want to join us on this journey through some of his short stories. You can also always help us out by leaving us rating and reviews. And we do have a new review to read this week, Matt, from Rebs Hive. They give us 5 stars and say, best podcasters. I followed Matt and Scott from Kingslingers to this podcast. I'm going through and listening to the books and or movies I have already read or watched and saving some episodes for after I catch up. Flanagan creates such intriguing material, and I love listening to Matt and Scott deconstruct it. I have tried listening to other King, etc. podcasts, and none of them have been as engaging or positive as the one Scott and Matt run. I look forward to more episodes. Well, thanks, Reb. It's very nice of you. I'm glad we do an engaging show. I'm enjoying the hell out of it, so it's good to see that people are also enjoying it.
Yeah, thanks for your kind words.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to everyone who continues to send those rating and reviews in. We do appreciate it. Also, make sure if you're a Spotify listener, Spotify has like a comment thing. Spotify doesn't have like a review system. Well, you can rate podcasts. You can't leave reviews, but you can leave comments on every single episode. And we do read those comments. So if you want to get in touch with us or share something with us, or share some opinions on a specific episode or anything, the Spotify comments are a pretty cool way of doing that. And we are uploading the video episodes to Spotify as well. So if you don't want to watch them on YouTube, if you're a Spotify listener, you can see the videos there.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it. One of our shorter episodes, Matt. Wow.
Yeah.
So we really turned those screws.
That's what that means.
Is that not when in Rome? Is that
when in Rome.
All right, folks. We will see you right back here next week. Until then, rest in peace, Mr. James.
Yeah.
He's actually dead, so it's not offensive.
Right.
Yeah.